Hey, everybody. Welcome to Cabinet Maker Profit System Podcast. Today, I've got a really cool guest. We're going to talk about we're going to talk to a guy who built his company from scratch to 70 employees, and then he sold it to his employees. Now, you don't have to build yours to 70 employees, but it sure might be nice to sell it to your team. And you're going to want to hear his story. Now, I'll tell you right up front, he's a landscaper, which made me think of a landscaping joke that I know you guys really wanted to hear. What do you get if you divide the circumference of a pumpkin by its diameter? Well, you get pumpkin pie. Okay, that one even got me. Listen, we're going to be talking to Carroll Fitzgerald. He's in Waco, Texas. Got a great story about how he turned this business into a real viable entity and then sold it. One of the things that occurred to me as we were doing the interview is that you might have blind spots in your company that you're not aware of right now. So if you want to grab the blind spots assessment from me, just text me, just say blind spots, and then I'll shoot it off to you. You guys already know my cell phone number, but I'll repeat it in case you're finally at your desk and you're not driving around. It's 315-903-7853. Let's get to the interview with Fitz. I know you're going to love it. See you on the other side. Carroll Fitzgerald, how are you?
I am great on this summer day in Texas.
Summer day in Texas. So it's what, 167 there? 180?
No, we've had a lot of rain. It's probably 80 degrees today.
80's doable.
Doable. It's very nice. All week we've got a lot of rain. Everything's green and pretty.
Yeah, it and then it just gets humid when the heat turns up.
Yep.
Yeah. Every once in a while, people will send me a picture of their dashboard reading. It says 127. They're like, Dom, I'm in the truck listening to your show. It's 127.
127.
Yeah, and they're inside in their air-conditioned cabin.
Yes, I hear you.
Well, and you're used to that because you built from scratch a massive landscaping company.
Well, I don't know if it's massive, but it's a large size, and we serviced a lot of accounts and was very creative with landscape and irrigation and tree services.
Yeah. Well, the reason you're here, because people listening to the show are going to say, I don't do that trade at all. We're not doing home services. But the reason you're here is not only did you build it from scratch, coming from a totally different career, but you sold the company to your employees, which I think is a fantastic story for us to learn about.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So do you mind if I ask you a pretty abrupt question?
Help yourself.
All right, Fitz, look, who the heck are you? And by the way, how is it you come to be speaking to this group of forward-facing contractors all over the world?
Well, we'll start with that part first. I met you at an acquisition.com conference in Las Vegas. I was there with my daughter, who is a medical doctor, and she's trying to learn how to grow her business. And you and I just met in one of our break times and started talking, and you asked me what I did, and you went, wow.
Yeah.
That's something we've got to talk about. So
it's a story worth telling to more people than just you and I at the back of the room at a breakout group at Alex Hormozzi's event.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
But that was a good event, and I met a lot of good people, and Lauren learned a lot of things for her practice, and I learned some things to help her, and I met you.
Yeah. And like you said, lots of other great people.
Yeah.
What was interesting is that, we all, and I wonder if you feel the same way, we all think we're in our own industry and everybody's in our industry.
Yes.
And then we go into that Hormozzi event. You got Lauren. She's a doctor.
Yes.
She's got more initials behind her name than a military general.
Well, I don't know about that, but
right.
Yes, she is doing good too.
Yeah. But she's in the room with you, a landscaper, and me, a cabinetry and trades guy. And we're all taking the same notes.
Same notes.
Same actions.
Telling the same story. How we did it.
Well, that's what you're here for. I want to hear how you did it. So take us back to the beginning, Fitz. Tell us where you are in the world. If we poked at a map, where you are, how you started in landscaping, because it was not a straight line for you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm from Texas, born and raised here in a town kind of in West Texas, near Brownwood, Texas. I graduated with 28 people in a high school, Bangs High School.
And then were you the valedictorian out of 28 people?
Valedictorian? No, I was third in line. I missed missed the salutatory and by 9/10 of a point, 9/100 of a point, and so, but
Right.
it's no big deal. And then I took off and went to Waco, Texas, and went to Baylor University. It's
Mm.
the world's largest private Baptist university, and got my degree in finance. And I knew I made a decision I wanted to go into banking, and I
Mm.
interviewed a bank president, and he told me the best way to get into banking is to get in the regulation and become a bank examiner. So
Mm.
I got with the Department of Banking in Texas and joined the force, got the job after about 2 months after I graduated. And then I started learning banking. And after 4 years, I was a commissioned bank examiner. I was ready to get into banking, so I jumped and become a vice president as a commercial lender in a bank in Brownwood, Texas. And so my career in banking grew
Yeah.
real good, and I ended up in Waco at a local community bank that was, back then it was probably a hundred oh, actually, I'm trying to think. We probably reached 100 million, which
In
is
in
just,
assets.
yeah,
Yeah.
which is nothing anymore. And
But still, it,
yeah, so yeah,
so
so
interesting that you came from banking and then
yeah,
you built a landscaping, lawn services, tree services company, because that's not, like I was saying, that's pinball.
yeah,
That's taking the pinball path.
yeah, yeah.
Now, you apparently you turned around, or you were part of a team that turned around a bank.
Yeah, well, yeah, the bank was in trouble when I got there,
Mm.
and so it was kind of our charge to clean it up, and it was pretty severe. And when I got in there, it was worse than we thought. So there was four of us really that just buckled down and
Mm.
just started foreclosing and getting judgments against people and making demand and collecting a lot of money. And in 5 years time we turned the bank around to where it was a one rated bank. And
Mm.
so it was a very good experience. And so
Just so we can translate that banking language into our language in the trades, what are the flags? And this is not part of what we're talking about here today, because we're here to talk about how you built the landscaping business. But what are the flags that you would look for as a banker when I walked through the door as a trade contractor, and the flags that said, we're not touching this guy, we're not lending him a dime?
well, you see, banks like collateral.
Mm.
A red flag is uh, a contractor that comes in, like you're saying, that says, my tax returns, they don't show profit. I don't pay taxes, because I don't want to pay taxes. So that's a red flag. We
Yeah.
like the contractor comes in that says, my tax returns look good, my balance sheet looks good, my
Mm.
all my paperwork's in order. I need to come in and visit with you for a line of credit or what piece of equipment, whatever it might
Sure.
be. So that, there's a lot of red flags, and with just experience, you learn how to wash your way through the red flags and how to qualify somebody,
Yeah.
a customer.
Now, speaking of red flags, how did you move from being I'm going to say this as a funny thing, but not as it's not supposed to be a mean joke, but how did you move from being a gray guy in a gray suit doing gray work at a bank to landscaping? And what kind of conversation was that at the kitchen table?
Oh, well, that is it. Well, it was a slow process, but let's don't be making fun of my gray hair. At least I
I
have,
got the same color. I just have less.
yeah. And it wasn't gray, forever. But forever, I wore a suit and tie,
Yeah.
and in the last years, it was like during the summer we didn't have to wear ties, so it did loosen up, and but that was I left the banking business in 2001,
Okay.
and but when I was at the bank was in trouble, and we had a lot of foreclosures, and a lady was working under. She was working with me on getting these properties in order and ready to sell, and
Mm.
she had to take care of them. And she had a guy come in, and he would mow all the properties, and she kept getting more and more letters from the city saying, we're going to go do it and charge you. So I'd say, give me 8 or 10 of those yards, and we'll take care of them. uh, and I want to teach my kids how to work. And, so took my 8-year-old son and my 11-year-old daughter, which is Lauren.
Which is so
And
Lauren was pushing a lawnmower?
she was
That's
pushing
hard
a
to admit. She's
lawnmower.
such an elegant woman. I can't see her pushing a lawnmower with boots on. And
Yeah. And let me tell you, after year one, each that summer, they each got about $900 in the pocket, and they just thought that was
well,
big time.
that changes their opinions
Yeah,
quick, doesn't it? Yeah.
but the next summer, Lauren said, I'm not going out to sweat like that ever again.
Yeah.
So anyway, Jeff and I just kind of kept growing the
And
business.
Jeff's your son.
Yes.
Yeah. So
And
you guys kept growing the business. Just started two guys, lawnmower. What was your first?
yes,
What was your first
lawnmower and
truck? Did you have a truck, a
literally,
trailer? What did you do?
oh yeah, white Chevrolet truck, just like everybody else on the corner.
Yeah.
And but in the beginning, we had a 22-inch snapper, self-propelled, and that
Oh,
way
okay.
Jeffrey could, he'd be underneath. He was so small,
Oh God.
and but
His
we had
forearms must have been huge by the end of that summer, just
yeah,
clenching that self-propel.
yeah, and we had electric wire weed eater, electric wire blower, hedgers. Everything was just long extension cords because that's before
Really?
the battery operated.
I'll
And
tell you what, there's less maintenance. They might look ugly and people might laugh, but there's just nothing goes wrong. You just need a
right,
long extension cord,
yeah,
unless you mow it. How many times did you run over the cord?
no, we did. We're always finished with the mowing before we do
Yeah,
that. But
okay.
that was just a year or two, and we upgraded. So the business just kept growing and growing. And my son, when he left off to college, the business was doing too good, and I just couldn't just drop it. So I kept it going and kept a bunch of high school students working on weekends,
Sure.
and I would get out there on weekends and spend 10 hours on Saturdays helping them get them done. And and then I had some other friends to join me. Uh, they had sons, they had boys that were friends of my son, and so it was father and son deal. We'd go and mow yards, and then as this was developing, people would always ask, "Well, I want some bushes planted," and that's the term for shrubs and greenery.
It's the
And
code word. Yeah.
yeah, and so I just had to take that. I had to start doing that, but I was not a designer. So I hired somebody to design my first landscape. They were redoing a house, and,
Interesting.
and I hired a designer, and he gave me the plans. And so then I was able to get the plants procured, and I had people to help and come, and we planted the whole yard. We got the irrigation. I hired another company to put in irrigation. And, so that was my first big landscape. And it was probably $20,000, and didn't know what I was doing, but it turned out nice. And the customer was very happy, and they still use our service to this day.
Oh, they do.
Yes.
Great. So those bushes took.
Yes, they took, and
They took.
probably been replaced a bunch of several, that was 25 years ago.
I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this question, but it feels like you approached this landscaping business like you did banking, or your observations from dealing with many clients, because you hit a certain point and you realize you have to bring in another person to do what you didn't know how to do, which was design. And in cabinetry and millwork, it's the same thing. We have designers, we have engineers, we have draftspeople, which anybody in this trade has done that.
Yes.
But they realize at some point they have to spend the money to bring in that person.
Absolutely. And that's really how the company transitioned. Like on that first job, I had to hire an irrigation company to come in and do the irrigation. Well, so every landscape job I did, if I did a new house, I was always waiting on this contractor. And we were small potatoes back then, and they're going to take care of their big builders first. And so I'm waiting and waiting. I get so frustrated. So, I go out and hire a licensed irrigator. And boom, ever since then, I've had a department of irrigators. There's probably 8 people in the company. And,
now,
so they do all repairs, but they can do full installs at any kind of installation.
I'm going to go in a very geeky, dorky, business coachy direction here, but you're going to love it because you and I are very similar, even though you come from banking. What's the impact to your short-term cash flow when you hire that new high-priced expert or certified person? In your case, an irrigator. In our case, it might be an engineer or an estimator. What's the immediate impact on cash flow, and what's the long-term thing that we're looking at?
Well, the immediate one is that, you're fixing to hire somebody for, back then it was probably 30, 40,000. And, so that does impact your cash flow,
Yeah.
but you got to also remember, I had made the transition and I was a high paid salary person at the bank, so I was in good financial condition, so I did capitalize the company, I think with $50,000. And, so that's kind of what I started in
Sure.
2001. And, so I did have a base and, we just didn't spend big. But, that person, that irrigator, it took, it started producing itself so fast because I didn't have to hire an
Yeah.
outside contractor and pay his contractor rate. I mean, I had it at cost.
You had
And
it at cost, and he could or she could do that job 8 hours a day
yes,
and
yes,
really put out a lot of product or service. Whereas even if you could do that skill, you'd be able to do it a little bit here and there, dribs and drabs through the day. You just never get the, what do we call it? Economies of scale. You'd
yeah,
never get
no.
the momentum.
I was a banker. I was not an irrigator. I was not a landscape designer. I was a business person, and
Yeah.
so that's the one thing I would say that I carried over when I started the company for hiring these kind of positions is I just understood cash flow, and I knew when a big job would come in and say a $50,000 payment would come in, you don't take that money and go buy a new widget that costs 25,000. You
It's not
know,
your 50 yet.
yeah, it's not my 50, and just put it in the bank. And, so I was always real big on keeping cash balances and building up liquid assets. So if I wanted to hire an irrigator or a landscape designer,
Hmm.
the cash flow was there. And, so that's the way it just kind of slowly evolved.
I think I made a mistake in our interview here.
I
Yeah,
don't,
that's just classic Dom. It's okay. I make mistakes all the time. We need to paint a picture of what this, because it's called, is it called Fitz's or Fitzgerald?
it's called Fitzgerald's.
Fitzgerald's. Paint a picture of us how Fitzgerald's looks now. Is it two employees and a couple of, broken trucks, or what's it actually look like now?
Okay. Well, Fitzgerald's in the beginning, it was Fitzgerald Landscaper Ltd, a partnership. And so I amended the name. I thought, well, we don't need landscaper because we have this logo that you see behind us.
Mm.
We have all white trucks, and this logo is in a very pretty colored green, grassy green, and it says Fitzgerald. So we cut off the landscaper because it's too long, and so we just became Fitzgerald. So we have built up, and we have probably 30 trucks out there,
Mm.
maybe 35, because all the managers and owners, they have a white vehicle, white
Right.
truck, and it
Yeah.
has the same logo on there. And so it was uh, the lady that came up with the design 25 years ago. She said, you just give this 5 years and you will be branded.
Yeah.
And she charged me 2,500. I thought, oh, that's horrible, paying that.
Especially today, you know what a logo
It,
costs
oh,
today? It's
yeah,
nothing. I mean, because
yeah.
of the chat. But you've got 35 trucks on the road. Does that mean you've got about 70 people in the company?
Yeah, yeah. There's probably 70 to 75 at this time.
Mm.
And
Is
but
the sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, when I sold the company, it was probably 65.
65. So
Yeah.
they've grown.
Yes.
Yeah. We'll get to the selling part in a second.
Okay.
In Texas, is there a financial or tax or implication for crossing that 50 employee threshold?
I don't think so. I think it's 100, maybe 100 employees.
Okay.
But I mean, because I never had any kind of regulatory differences or changes that I know of, or at least nobody told me, and I didn't do anything different.
Well, nobody listens to the show anyway, so you're probably not going to get in any trouble. So at what point did you decide that you were going to, I mean, you grew the business, you added different services as customers needed them, because I know you did tree services as well, but let's start to talk a little bit about selling the business, because that wasn't just an event. that was some sort, and I know from talking to you, there was a lot of pre-thought
Yes.
in that. So when did that pre-thought start? What went on in your head that made you think, you know what, I think I might sell this one day? And then what did you do after that?
Well, for starters, I really had no idea it was going to grow to be the kind of company it was.
Mm.
We just organically were growing, and we added all the divisions, and we kept going from 25 employees to 35, and then 50, and then sales just kept multiplying every year. But I was not in it to, just turn it and sell it and make money. It just organically grew. uh, Me and my wife, we live very conservative. We don't live high. We don't take exotic trips all the time. We lived within our means. We pay all of our bills.
Mm.
And but I'm going to say 5 years before I sold the company is when I actually met with a succession person to just say, I am getting older and I've got to start planning. And so we literally started thinking about all the alternatives and that we were going to do. And the thing that I told this person is that there's one thing I will not do, and that I will not sell to a big, corporate America landscape company that comes in and writes you the check and you're out, and then everybody else is just reporting to corporate America. And so I promised all managers and employees that I would not do that. And so in all my discussions with the succession planner, that was part of my conversation. We're not going to do that. Right. We've got to come up with a way to sell the company to an employee group. And so I really for 5 years was in the planning stages of that. Yeah. Not active, but it was in my head that in 5 years I want to sell.
Yeah. Or you want to change the way, though, because for you the sale was a little bit different, which is pretty cool. I think people are going to want to hear it. But these are conversations. These are me and my team. These are our favorite conversations. Yeah. Where somebody's wise and forward looking, saying it's not going to happen today, but I've got to start to get ready.
Yeah.
What are the steps? And then the steps start slowly. It's this, and then this, and then this, and then the pace picks up towards 4.5.
Yes.
It really starts to pick up at 3.5, and then a little bit more at 4. You know what I mean? But it ramps up. And but you stuck to your values.
And as I got close, then I'm like, am I really going to do this? I said I was going to do this.
Well, hey, listen, Fitz, I couldn't help but notice you're sitting in the same office of the company you sold. So have you done it?
Yes, I sold it.
I know.
3.5 years ago, but I'm still on as consultant,
right,
at this point.
Yeah,
and so I'm not doing a lot. I do one of the payrolls for the managers, and so it's a very different structure. The group that I sold it to are doing a very good job. The company's very stable. That they did listen to one thing I said. Cash is king. Don't be paying yourselves all these huge salaries and take money out of the bank. Keep good bank balances, and you can do whatever you want. And that's just proven to work for my model for 20 plus years. And don't ever drain the bank account. Just
conserve that cash.
Conserve the cash, and then own equipment. Every year I get the accountants involved and see that I needed to spend money and I wanted depreciation. So I would kind of say, all right, guys, what do you need? Equipment wise, we're in the last quarter. It's time to spend, and I want to spend 200,000 or 300 or whatever.
Yeah.
And so we would always keep new equipment and keep updating. So
you'd rotate. You'd look at some equipment and say, well, that's at the end of its depreciation cycle, or the repairs are too high. Let's get rid of it.
Yes, very true. Now, trucks, we can just run the dog out of them because, they still look good and they're still white and they got the green logo and they got, they're well maintained. We've got 2 mechanics.
Oh, you do have your own mechanics. That's a brilliant move. Yeah.
But on a transmission replacement or major engine repair, no, we take them in because that would take too much of their time. Because we probably have 100. The new owners probably have 100 50 pieces of equipment that are, the small engine, weed
Smalls to,
eaters,
yeah.
mowers, riding mowers, and it's so much to keep up with. And, so.
Well, who did you sell to? You keep talking about the new owners, but these new owners are.
Well, it's I sold to four managers, and one of them has been with me for 15 years now, and he's the landscape designer. He has his.
He's not that first landscape designer you hired, was it?
No, he's not. No,
okay.
No, I've gone through. It took a while to get the right team in place, but then some like the first landscape designer, he was with me for several years, but he went his own route and did his own thing, and that's what you kind of would see would happen. And so it took several years, but I really have always concentrated on trying to get a well-rounded team of managers underneath me. And as I told you, I am not an expert in landscape or irrigation or tree trimming.
Yeah,
I can get behind a mower and go mow, and I can weed eat. But other than that, I'm just a pretty good business person and understand.
And I'm so glad that you said that and that you're open about saying that. I try to say that as well. This entire show is not about being a better tradesperson. It's not about being a better cabinet maker or whatever trade you're in. It's about being a business person who just happens to be a cabinet maker, who happens to run a cabinet shop. That little, it sounds like such a simple sentence, doesn't it?
Yes, but it's big.
But the impact is big. And then you've been able to create a legacy because 4 of your employees bought the company.
Correct.
Yeah. How did you choose the 4? Because people listening are going to want to know, maybe they've got a crew that they've got a lot of faith in. How do you, did you invite them? Did they put together a group? Did they come to you? Hey, are you curious about ways to develop your foreman and make him or her into the best leader that your floor or install crew could ever have? Well, we've got something here for you. It's called the Foreman Development Self-Assessment and Career Planning Tool. It is a fantastic tool. It's being used by cabinet and millwork shops right now, and you can see it as well. Just send me a text message. My cell phone number is 315-903-7853, and just say Foreman Tool, and then I'll know which one to send you.
I really started with one guy that I visited with more than anybody in coming up and selecting the other 2 or 3 that we thought would mesh and get along. And, and so when we've kind of firmed up those 3 others, then, then I started talking to them one-on-one, and they all were very excited to get the opportunity, to buy in.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the way it started. We spent a full year, developing that, and nothing was rushed, and coming up with
exactly. I'm so glad you said that, Fitz. Nothing was rushed. It's a preset plan. You work at it like a formula. Do this, then do that, then do the next thing. Sometimes you take a slide back, something happens, something else in the business gets you busy, but you've got to stay on that path, one step at a time.
And it worked. It worked really good. And once we got the team, the 4 people, they all agreed that they would be ones that could work together. And they've had a lot of experience learning how to work as a partnership. It's a little different when one partner wants to go spend some money that benefits him, where maybe it doesn't the other 3, and the other 3 may say, well, we don't see a need. So it's a different animal having 4 people versus me calling the shots.
Right.
So that's the only thing I would say is to be sure if you're going to have partners like that the partnership is workable, and also always have a way to get out of the partnership or go a different direction.
That is such a mature thing to say. It's hard for people to hear, but before we go into this deal, let's talk about how we're going to get out.
Yes. How do we get out of it?
How do we get out? Yeah. Here we are in honeymoon phase, but we should talk about the divorce. And I have found that as I got older, it's much easier to have that conversation. But when I was younger, it felt rude, impolite.
Yes. Right.
But life is life. Things happen.
Yeah.
Things really do happen, and we have to think about how that's going to, pass. Hey, when you first approach, obviously we've got confidences that we can't break. So I'm not asking anything. I'm not trying to ask anything confidential, but there's probably one of those four people you approached who said, I'd love to, but I don't have the money.
Yeah.
Right.
That was the case with all of them.
Okay. So 4 out of 4. And again, you just use it as a model because you come from a banking background.
Yeah.
How could somebody listening think, well, I've got a management team that I think might buy it, or just one person?
Yeah.
How can you structure that so they can do it if they don't have the money?
Okay. So being a banker, I knew an acceptable structure that a bank could live with. And we had a lot of equipment, and my balance sheet was very clean. My tax returns were good. I knew this was a bankable transaction, and so you're right. None of the four had the money to come up and pay even a large down payment. But I knew that this sale would qualify under the SBA program, which is a government guaranteed loan program.
Mm-hmm.
It's done through the commercial banks. And I knew mine was perfect because, we probably had $1 million worth of equipment.
Just rolling stock.
Rolling stock. And then when you have 5 years of good tax returns and you got this management team in place, it was a perfect deal. And I said, all we got to do is get you to a bank that does SBA financing. Mm-hmm. And, I'm willing to carry a chunk of it. I know that the SBA will, they typically will do 50% on equipment. On real estate, they'll do a larger percent, but there was no real estate involved. Yeah. And they would require 10% down. And, then I was willing to carry the second.
A vendor take back. Just for people listening, that's typically called a VTB, a vendor take back.
Yes. Yeah. And, so I had everything paid for, so I had no debt on the company anywhere. So it made it easy.
Well, the bankers love that.
Yeah. Yeah. They love it.
That's a clean slate. It's a freshly set table.
Right.
Turkey, everything, but nobody's touched the turkey. Nobody's touched the cranberry sauce. And they get to come in and put, first position on those things.
Yes. And it was a very clean, they bought the entity. So the balance sheet stayed just as it was, so the cash was huge. And I said, well, we're going to draw cash down. And I gave them a figure, but it would leave them a lot of money in the bank because they're buying the business. Mm. And any of the credit card, that's the only thing we owed on. And we always ran it up to 50 to 100,000 every month, so they just assumed that balance. But I didn't have any.
But they also assume the receivables. So they bought
receivables, yeah.
So people might ask this question: did they buy the shares, or did they?
Yeah, they bought the shares.
They bought the shares of the company.
Yeah, it was a limited partnership, and it was a general partner was an LLC. They bought all of these entities and then just transferred it over to their ownership.
Yeah, incredible. You really have changed a lot of people's lives there. Not only the employees, but now you've got 4 owners that.
Yes, and if they keep doing what I've done for 20 years, I mean, they'll get to sell again and do the same thing, to the next generation.
Oh, is the wheel already set up so that they can sell?
Well, no, I mean, they're all young. Most of them is the lady who's administrator. She's maybe a few years older, but they range from the late 30s to the lower 40s. The 3 guys, and then and the office, the admin person is maybe 8 or 10 years older, but she's very mature and very knowledgeable. Very honest. I gave her, she had total access to the books. She was not on a signature card, but it's 100% trust with her. And you got to have that. And,
well, like you said earlier, Fitz, it's about putting that right team together.
Yeah.
Hey, let me ask about that for a second, because people listening right now, their ears open, right? They want to do this, but they're listening to all this and they're listening to your part about the team. And they're like, oh, that would work for me, except I got this guy, Gary. Gary's not right. Have you ever had not right Gary and you've had to let him go at the pain of, you know what I mean? He's the right technical person, but he's not the right culture fit. Have you ever encountered that?
Oh yes. Yeah, it took several years to come up with this perfect, correct team, and and we all have our flaws, but yes, I learned in the middle of owning the company. The first years, when you have the
Yeah,
gear
all
you're
hands on deck.
out, it's horrible, and I dealt with it horribly. I didn't want to deal with
Yeah,
gear.
I've done that too. Just ignore it.
It's horrible, but as I went on further, if somebody come in and didn't work, I'd bring them into my office that this is just not working. And, I cut my losses right then and there. It was painful. And I'm very pro employee, but if it's not working, it's just not working.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope everybody heard Fitz say that and not me. But you said it
Yeah.
kindly, but without, there's really no room for negotiation. It's just not working.
It's just never fun though.
I don't know if you've ever been on a sports team and heard this. Dominic, you're a great, let's just say midfielder. You're just not our midfielder.
You're a great landscaper, but you're just not our
landscaper, right? But sometimes you just have to say that and own up.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, listen, you missed a part of your story there.
What's that?
The famous people you bought trees from.
Oh, yeah. Well, so the landscape. I will say the landscape when I really got a designers in here and started growing it and design and build and then we got in on the Baylor campus and we did a lot of construction things with them. But
oh my goodness, you're doing the school campus?
Well, we were at the time. They had some changes, and so we're not there anymore.
I guess my point is you're at that level where you can win those contracts and service that type of commercial industrial property.
Oh yeah, and big, huge commercial companies that come in and would build big structures on Baylor campus. They kind of learned to call us. Anybody that comes into Waco, the commercial contractors. We get the call and we get the. A lot of times they already had it designed, but our managers can take those designs and interpret them and do a complete install. And so
bushes. They can put some bushes.
Okay, bushes. That's where we're going. So early on, we met this guy who had a tree farm because we buy a lot of trees, and his tree farm. He was partners with George W. and George W.
Speaking of bushes,
George W.'s ranch is 30 minutes from town out on this beautiful ranch. And so we went and started looking at his trees, their trees, and George W. had nothing to do with it. He was just partner, silent partner.
Sure.
And so we started buying these trees, and all these trees were like big ones that take Skytrax to plant them and move them around. And so that's what we just got to do that. And my highlight, which I told you, so I'll tell everybody. We got a text one day, and our designer and me got a text from the partner from the tree farm. He said, "Would y'all like to meet the president tomorrow?" And boom, I answered that text so fast. Yes.
With a salute. Your son was in the Air Force. You're
And so the designer that was here at the time, he was a manager. He answered. So the next day we got to drive out and go through security.
Just a little bit of security, I'm sure.
Yeah. Now he was already out of being president. He had retired. Right. But so we went over to one of the big barns, and we're sitting there and we look up and we see this ATV side by side coming down one of the roads from his house, and behind him the old Suburban with security following him.
Yeah, bunch of guys in glasses wearing suits in 100-degree weather.
Oh yeah. And he gets off that thing and comes out and puts his hands and shakes our hand, introduces himself. And thanks us for buying trees from their tree farm, and then he takes off asking so many questions and asking about labor and what are y'all doing about the immigrants and illegal immigrants, and so we got to visit with him for about 30 minutes.
Wow.
So that was kind of a highlight. So of course I have a picture hanging in my office.
Of course. It's interesting, and I don't know. It's not funny, but interesting. I have a friend that went mountain biking on his ranch because I guess he
Yeah.
likes mountain biking as well. And
Yes.
she said the same thing. He said he's super approachable, very curious, nice guy, very open. They called their group of mountain bikers Peloton One
Peloton one. How
because
about that?
but they're riding around the ranch having a great time. They also had to go through the security.
Yeah.
Yeah, as you would imagine. I think a sitting president has a certain level of
Yeah.
security, but all past presidents also have
Yeah.
levels of security for themselves. So that's pretty
But
cool.
yeah, and they ran the bomb detector underneath the truck, and, ran our driver's license and everything before we went in. So,
Yeah,
but that was a good experience. That was about 10 years ago.
yeah, it is a good experience. It's
Yeah.
something for the history of the company.
Yes.
Well, Fitz, you're in that mode now where you're adding to the legacy of the business, and I'm going to ask you to add to the legacy of the audience here. There's somebody.
So
Well, okay, go ahead, and then
no,
I'll.
you go. You.
Well, I was going to say there's somebody who's 5, maybe 10 years into their business right now, and they can't even see that far into the future where they might be sitting like you are.
Yeah,
What?
I think they actually do. They see the value of the asset that they bought, and I think that I sold it. I got the company in that 5-year planning. I also got the company evaluated.
Mm,
Had 2 different evaluations. So there was no argument, and I wasn't trying to stab them with a high price. It
mm,
was a high price, but there was they didn't come back and say, well, we'll give you 75% of that. Because they knew it was a good price. They had seen the appraisal, and they
right.
had seen the cash flow, and so we just I had that figure, and we just marched forward and we spent 3 months putting the purchase agreement together, and then we
Mm,
closed on it. It was a lot of back and forth with my attorney and their attorney to come up with just the purchase agreement. Once we got that done, closing was
I'm so glad you said that. This is not instant. Selling your
it's,
business.
it's
Now
not.
it can, and you're a banker.
Yeah.
We can sell this business quick if I sell it for cheap.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't. Yeah. I don't
We
want
don't
to
want to
sell
sell it for cheap.
it. Yeah.
So you had a very predictable path. I mean, the valuation or the succession person you used is exactly what we do. It's that
Yeah.
it just follows a path, simple systems, follow the steps, pick away at it, and it'll happen. But you can't just try to do it overnight. I mean, you can, but your outcome is going to be
Yeah.
not great.
I do want to tell you one other thing that the
Yeah.
banker told me that did the SBA package. It was their representative, but I knew the banker. You live in Waco, Texas, everybody.
Everybody. Yeah.
And but he said that was the fastest and quickest and easiest SBA package he had ever packaged up and got approved. He got it all approved in about 30 days. And
And that's because of your books.
yeah, because
Yeah.
everything he asked for, boom, I'd get it to him instantly. Equipment
Right.
list with current values, boom, I'd get it to him. 5 years tax returns, he had them. And so it was a very clean SBA, and but so I just encourage everybody to realize how important it is to keep clean, accurate, detailed books. Don't take those cash deals and put the cash in your pocket that never hit your books, because if you're going to sell this business one of these days, you want those tax returns to be real and look good.
Yeah. Yeah. It's running a business is a serious thing, but I have to give everybody listening credit because, the podcast or the YouTube channel, it's free. Anybody can
Yeah.
watch it. Go ahead. But most people don't. The people that do, so the people listening right now or watching right now, they're the serious business owners. They're the people saying, hey, what's next? How do I, how are they ever going to meet Carroll Fitzgerald unless it was here and hear your story and then go, well, how does that landscaper story fit my millwork company or my plumbing company? But it
Yeah.
does. At the end of the day, I mean, your daughter is an accomplished physician. She was at the same class you and I met at,
Yes.
learning the same
Right.
things, right? So we're all just in business.
Yes.
Yeah.
She like I wish that I would have crossed over to the landscape about 10 years earlier, though. It just,
Really?
well, I just could have made it a bigger empire.
Empire. There's the
Yeah,
word.
yeah.
Fitz. Now we see the real Fitz.
Uh-oh.
Empire builder. All right. If you had a message to give to yourself, let's say 10 years ago, looking at where you are now, what would you have said to yourself?
Oh, just to keep doing what I was doing, keep uh, my business was very service oriented. And so it's so important to take care of the customer and take the critical things, the things you do wrong. So I said this 10 years ago, and I say it today. You're only as good as your service is today. And when that call comes in, you've got to take care of it. You've got to deal with the problems. And the little 2% of the problems feel like 95% of your problems. And but I would just say, just keep marching forward, slow and steady. Don't overspend. Be conservative. Hire good people. Just make it a good, clean, wholesome business.
Love it. Love it. I love that. People think entrepreneurs, business owners take risk. I do not like risk. And you don't sound like you like risk either. They're calculated moves. That's different than risk.
Yes.
That's very different.
I don't like risk. I'm not a risky one. I want the money in the bank. And that's why I'd rather, and it's nice. I kept the money in the bank forever, and I sold the business, and now I can come to Las Vegas and see you at a conference and do what I want to do.
Yeah, because you paid for it up front.
Yeah, pay for it up front. That's a good way to look at it.
Fitz, thank you so much for being here and sharing the story. It really is incredible. It's a very unique story.
Well, I appreciate it, and I'm so glad I ran into you. It was fun meeting you and getting to talk to you and to do this, and I appreciate you inviting me to your podcast. It was just fun.
For sure. Oh, if somebody wants to reach you, maybe they're in Waco and they want to get some commercial landscaping done, how do we find you?
Yeah, just go to the company's website and go to info at, and then our last part is Fitz Ltd. So that's info at FITZ, L as in Louise, T as in Tom, D as in dog.com. And it'll get to either the office will get it to me.
Perfect.
But if they have some landscaping needs, we'll get it to the landscaping management, the tree department, the irrigation department, or you need your yard mow. We have 4 distinct departments that'll take care of your needs.
Yeah, you guys are well taken care of.
Yeah.
Call Fitz.
Yeah.
Hey, this is great. Thank you so much. Say hi to Lauren for me. Give her a big wave and a hello. And thanks, Fitz. Great to talk to you.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Have a great day.
All right.
Bye-bye.
We'll see you. Take care.
Well, I have to say thanks to Carroll Fitzgerald for joining me on the show. What a great interview. Really good story. Nice guy, but very determined and taking those simple systems, those simple steps, and putting them in place and walking himself to the process he needed, and then creating a legacy for 4 of the employees in his company. I forgot one of the dad jokes I was going to tell Fitz, which is what kind of socks do gardeners wear? You guys might know this already. What kind of socks do gardeners wear? Garden hose. See, you're laughing. I'll give you a second to catch your breath. Thanks so much for listening to the episode. I really appreciate you being here. Look, we've got foreman training happening right now. And if you want to have your foreman and yourself in the next foreman training, you got to let me know because it fills up really quick. It's called Foreman and Supervisor 101. It's only 6 sessions long. It's super impactful, and it's made to increase the throughput in your shop, but also to finally train your foreman so that they are a leader leading your crew. Why? So that you can do like Fitz did. You can step back and actually run the company instead of running the floor. So very valuable training. Anyways, if you want in on that, or just if you want to find out more information, shoot me a text, 315-903-7853, and say, Dom, tell me about the foreman training. And then you know what I'll do? I'll tell you about the foreman training. All right. Thanks for checking in, folks. We'll talk to you soon. Have a good day.